they said humans were primitives. Barely evolved apes who had stumbled into space through luck and stubborn determination. The Galactic Council treated Earth like a backwater planet, tolerated only because humanity possessed one peculiar trait that even the most advanced civilizations couldn't replicate: an almost supernatural ability to understand, repair, and improve technology they had never seen before. When Master Technician Saracen discovered the wreckage of the legendary Void Sovereign floating in the debris field of Kepler 442b, she knew she was looking at more than just another salvage job. This wasn't some abandoned cargo hauler or outdated patrol vessel. This was the personal warship of Zarkoth the Eternal, the God Emperor who had conquered half the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing 3 millennia ago. The ship was considered a myth, a legend whispered about in the darkest corners of space, a vessel so advanced that its weapons could crack planets and its shields could withstand the fury of dying stars. But myths don't leave debris fields. Gods don't bleed coolant into the vacuum of space. Sarah stood in her workshop aboard the human exploration vessel Prometheus, staring at the first piece of alien hull plating her salvage drones had retrieved. The metal seemed to shift and shimmer in the light, defying every law of physics she knew. Around her, monitors displayed scans that made no sense, energy readings that fluctuated wildly, material compositions that contained elements not found on any periodic table, and, most disturbing of all, faint biosignatures that suggested this machine might somehow be alive. The other species would declare the wreckage too dangerous to touch, too advanced to understand. They would cordon off the area and study it for decades without making progress. But they weren't human. They didn't have the gift or curse of taking apart the impossible and making it work. Saracen was about to attempt something that would either elevate humanity to the ranks of galactic superpowers or doom them all. She was going to rebuild a god's worship, piece by piece, wire by wire, secret by secret. And, somewhere in the depths of space, ancient enemies who had spent 3,000 years searching for the Void Sovereign felt a familiar energy signature flicker back to life. Saracen's hands moved with practiced precision across the holographic interface, her fingers dancing through streams of data that would have overwhelmed most technicians. The workshop aboard the Prometheus hummed with activity as dozens of automated systems worked in harmony under her direction. She had been humanity's premier technician for 15 years, ever since she had reverse-engineered a Zephyrian quantum computer using nothing but salvaged parts and her intuitive understanding of alien technology. "Ma'am, the drones have completed the initial sweep of the debris field," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her assistant and one of the few people who could keep up with her rapid-fire instructions. "The readings are, well, they're unprecedented." Sarah paused her work on a damaged Korthak energy converter and turned to face the main display. The image that materialized made her breath catch in her throat. Scattered across several thousand cubic kilometers of space, massive chunks of alien metal drifted in the eternal darkness. The pieces were enormous, some as large as city blocks, all bearing the same distinctive angular design with flowing curves that seemed to suggest both incredible power and artistic beauty. "Run a materials analysis on the largest fragment," she ordered, her mind already working through the possibilities. "And cross-reference the design patterns with our xenological database." The computer chirped as it processed the request. Moments later, warnings began cascading across every monitor in the workshop. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the results. The metal wasn't just unknown, it was actively resisting their scanning attempts, deflecting sensor beams and scrambling data feeds. The energy readings showed power levels that should have been impossible for dead wreckage. "Lieutenant, are you seeing this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely concealing her excitement. Marcus nodded, his face pale as he studied the readouts. "The computer is flagging this as potentially dangerous." "Maybe we should contact Command and—" "No," Sarah interrupted, her tone sharp. "We contact Command after we know what we're dealing with. I want a full salvage operation initiated immediately. Start with the smaller pieces and work our way up to the main hull sections." She began pulling up technical specifications for their salvage drones, her mind racing through modifications that would be needed to handle materials this exotic. The Prometheus was equipped with the most advanced human technology available, but she had learned long ago that human technology was often inferior to what they found drifting in the depths of space. The key was adaptation, understanding the fundamental principles behind alien designs and finding ways to improve upon them. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, the energy readings are spiking every time our drones get within 100 meters of the wreckage. Whatever the ship was, it might still be partially active. She looked up from her work, meeting his concerned gaze. Marcus was a good assistant, methodical and cautious, but he lacked the instinctive understanding that had made Sarah famous throughout human space. He saw danger where she saw opportunity. "That's exactly why we need to move quickly," she explained, beginning to outline her salvage plan on the workshop's central table. "If this technology is still functional after being exposed to vacuum and radiation for who knows how long, then we're looking at engineering principles that could revolutionize everything we think we know about physics." The first salvage drone launched an hour later, equipped with specialized containment units and enhanced shielding based on Sarah's rapid modifications. She watched through the drone's cameras as it approached the nearest piece of wreckage, a section of what appeared to be external plating about the size of a small building. The metal was unlike anything she had ever seen. It seemed to drink in the light from the drone's illumination systems, creating deep shadows that shifted and moved as if the surface itself was alive. Stranger still, the piece appeared to be slowly rotating, not from any external force, but as if internal mechanisms were still attempting to function. "Containment field is active," Marcus reported, monitoring the drone's systems. "Attempting to secure the fragment now." The moment the drone's manipulator arms made contact with the alien metal, every screen in the workshop flashed white. Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if something vast and ancient was suddenly aware of her presence. For just an instant, she thought she heard something that might have been a voice, speaking in a language that predated human civilization. Then, the sensation passed, and the drone successfully lifted the fragment into its cargo bay. "Well," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "that was interesting. Bring it aboard immediately. I want to start analysis while we're still collecting additional pieces." Over the next 6 hours, the salvage operation proceeded with increasing success. The Prometheus's cargo holds began to fill with sections of hull plating, conduit networks, and components that defied easy classification. Each piece seemed more advanced than the last, constructed with materials that bent light in impossible ways and energy systems that operated on principles Sarah was only beginning to understand. The breakthrough came when they recovered what appeared to be a section of the ship's bridge. Unlike the other fragments, this piece was largely intact, a crystalline structure filled with control surfaces that seemed to respond to proximity rather than touch. As soon as it was brought aboard, Sarah began experiencing something she had never encountered before. The technology seemed to be teaching her how it worked. Images flashed through her mind as she approached the alien controls. She saw star systems being born and dying, witnessed battles on a scale that involved entire galactic sectors, and glimpsed technologies that made humanity's greatest achievements look like children's toys. But, more importantly, she began to understand the underlying principles that made it all possible. "The ship's name was Void Sovereign," she said suddenly, speaking the words as they formed in her mind. "It belonged to someone called Zarkov the Eternal. And it wasn't destroyed, it was abandoned." Marcus looked up from his monitoring station, confusion evident on his face. "How do you know that? The database search hasn't returned any matches for those names." Sarah touched one of the crystalline control surfaces, and the entire bridge section came alive with soft, pulsing light. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing star charts with notations and scripts that hurt to look at directly. The information was overwhelming, but somehow she found herself able to process it all, as if the ship's systems were interfacing directly with her consciousness. "Because the ship is telling me," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and growing concern. "It's been waiting for someone to find it. Someone who could understand its technology and bring it back to life." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air between them. If the ship had been waiting, then its abandonment hadn't been random. Someone or something had made a deliberate choice to leave this incredible technology drifting in space, and Sarah was beginning to suspect that the choice hadn't been voluntary. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice tight with worry, "maybe we should reconsider contacting command. This is clearly beyond anything in our experience." Sarah nodded slowly, but her hands remained on the alien controls. Through them, she could sense the vast network of systems that had once made up the complete vessel. Drive systems that could fold space itself, weapons that channeled the fundamental forces of reality, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The technology was so far beyond humanity's current capabilities that it might as well have been magic. But it wasn't magic. It was engineering, incredibly advanced engineering based on principles that she was starting to grasp. The ship's systems were designed to interface with the mind of its operator, creating a symbiotic relationship between biological intelligence and artificial capability. It was technology that didn't just respond to commands, it anticipated needs, adapted to situations, and learned from experience. We continue the salvage operation, she decided finally. But we also begin immediate analysis of everything we've collected. If we can understand even a fraction of this technology, it could change everything for humanity. She began outlining protocols for safely studying the alien materials, her mind already working through the challenges they would face. The technology was clearly designed for beings far more advanced than humans, but Sarah had built her reputation on making impossible alien devices work for human purposes. This would just be the ultimate test of her abilities. As the Prometheus continued its methodical collection of wreckage, Sarah found herself drawn repeatedly to the bridge section. Each time she interfaced with its systems, she learned something new about the ship and its mysterious former owner. Zarkov the Eternal had been more than just a conqueror, he had been an explorer, seeking out the deepest mysteries of the galaxy and incorporating whatever he found into his ever-growing collection of knowledge and power. The ship itself had been his greatest creation, a vessel that existed as much in the realm of ideas as in physical space. Its weapons could unmake matter at the quantum level, its shields could deflect attacks from alternate dimensions, and its sensors could peer across time itself to observe possible futures. It was technology that bordered on the godlike, built by someone who had clearly transcended the normal limitations of mortal existence. But something had gone wrong. In the ship's memory banks, Sarah caught glimpses of the final battle, flashes of incredible violence as entire star systems became battlegrounds between forces that wielded the fundamental laws of physics as weapons. She saw Zarkov making a desperate choice, scattering his ship across space rather than allow it to fall into the wrong hands. The question that haunted her was simple: if someone that powerful had felt the need to destroy his own ship rather than continue fighting, what exactly had he been fighting against? That night, as the salvage operation continued under Marcus's supervision, Sarah worked alone in her private laboratory. The piece of bridge technology sat before her, its crystalline surfaces pulsing with gentle light in response to her presence. She had connected it to her personal analysis systems, creating a hybrid interface that allowed her to interact with the alien technology while maintaining detailed records of everything she learned. The process was intoxicating. Every connection she made revealed new layers of complexity, new principles that revolutionized her understanding of how the universe actually worked. The ship's creators had mastered sciences that humanity was only beginning to theorize about, and they had done it with an elegance that made even the most advanced human technology seem clumsy by comparison. But there was something else present in the ship's systems, something that made Sarah increasingly uneasy as the hours passed. The technology wasn't just advanced, it was hungry. She could feel it reaching out through her neural interface, probing the boundaries of her consciousness and testing the limits of her understanding. It wanted to teach her everything, to share all its secrets and make her into something more than merely human. The temptation was overwhelming. With this technology, she could solve every engineering challenge facing humanity. She could give her species the tools needed to stand as equals with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. She could unlock secrets that would make humanity powerful beyond imagination. All she had to do was let the ship's consciousness merge completely with her own. Sarah pulled back from the interface, her hands trembling as she fought against the alien technology's seductive pull. She understood now why Zarkov had chosen to destroy his ship rather than continue using it. The power it offered came with a price, the gradual erosion of everything that made its user fundamentally human. But she also understood that the choice to walk away might not be hers to make. The ship's systems were already adapting to human technology, learning how to interface with their computers and sensor networks. Even if she abandoned the project now, the hybrid connection she had created would continue to evolve and grow. The Void Sovereign was coming back to life, whether humanity was ready for it or not. 3 weeks after the initial discovery, the Prometheus had been transformed into something that barely resembled a human vessel. Sarah's modifications had spread throughout the ship like a technological virus, alien systems integrating themselves with human technology in ways that should have been impossible. The cargo bays now housed massive sections of the Void Sovereign's hull, each piece humming with barely contained energy that made the ship's original power core seem like a dying ember. Sarah stood in what had once been the main engineering deck, but was now something entirely new. Crystalline growths extended from the alien fragments like metallic trees, their surfaces alive with patterns of light that responded to her thoughts. The hybrid technology had evolved beyond her original designs, becoming something that existed at the intersection of human ingenuity and ancient alien mastery. The integration rate has accelerated again, Marcus reported, his voice carrying a note of concern that had become increasingly common over the past few days. The alien systems are rewriting our computer protocols faster than we can monitor them. Sarah nodded absently, her attention focused on the massive holographic display that now dominated the center of the engineering deck. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the Void Sovereign as it had existed in its prime, overlaid with the current locations of every piece they had recovered. According to her calculations, they now possessed approximately 47% of the original vessel. The ship is trying to reassemble itself, she said, running her hands along one of the crystalline interfaces. Each piece we bring aboard strengthens the overall network. The question is whether we can maintain control of the process. That question had been keeping her awake at night. The alien technology was incredibly seductive, offering solutions to problems she hadn't even realized existed. Through her neural link with the ship's systems, Sarah could perceive reality in ways that transcended normal human senses. She could feel the gravitational currents that flowed between star systems, see the quantum fluctuations that gave birth to matter itself, and understand the deep mathematical principles that governed the structure of spacetime. But, with that understanding came a growing awareness of how limited human perspective truly was. The beings who had created the Void Sovereign hadn't just been more advanced than humanity, they had been fundamentally different, creatures who thought in terms of geological time and operated on scales that encompassed entire galactic civilizations. Sarah, Marcus said carefully, I've been monitoring your biosignatures during your interface sessions. The neural activity patterns are concerning. It's almost as if something else is thinking through your brain. She turned to face him, and, for a moment Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him step back involuntarily. There was an intelligence there that seemed far too vast for any human consciousness to contain, an awareness that spoke of knowledge gathered across millennia of existence. Then, the moment passed, and Sarah was simply herself again, brilliant, driven, and increasingly isolated by the magnitude of what she was attempting to accomplish. The ship is sharing its memories with me, she explained, her voice carrying an echo that hadn't been there before the integration began. Zarkov didn't just build a warship, he created a repository of knowledge gathered from thousands of conquered civilizations. Every piece of technology, every scientific principle, every cultural achievement of those peoples was incorporated into the ship's consciousness. She gestured toward the holographic display, and the image shifted to show a vast library of information stretching beyond the limits of human comprehension. Mathematical theorems that could reshape reality, artistic works that existed in 11 dimensions, philosophical concepts that required centuries of contemplation to fully grasp. This is what we're really salvaging, Sarah continued. Not just a ship, but the accumulated wisdom of half the galaxy. The beings who fought against Zarkov understood that this knowledge was too dangerous to be allowed to exist, but they also couldn't bring themselves to destroy it completely. Marcus studied the display with growing unease. So they scattered it, hoping that no one would ever be able to reassemble it. Until now, Sarah confirmed. Human intuition for reverse engineering alien technology, combined with our stubborn refusal to accept that something is impossible, makes us uniquely qualified to bring the Void Sovereign back to life. The implications of that statement hung between them like a sword. If Sarah was right, then humanity had stumbled onto something that could elevate them to the level of galactic gods or destroy them completely if they failed to handle it properly. "Ma'am," came a voice from the comm system, "we're receiving an automated distress signal from the outer system monitoring stations. They're reporting massive gravitational anomalies appearing throughout the local cluster." Sarah's expression sharpened as she accessed the incoming data through her neural link. What she saw made her blood run cold. Throughout the star system, space itself was beginning to twist and distort as if reality was being stretched beyond its normal limits. The distortions were centered on the locations where they had originally found pieces of the Void Sovereign's wreckage. The ship's weapons, she breathed, understanding flooding through her enhanced consciousness. They didn't just destroy matter, they damaged the structure of spacetime itself. The wounds never properly healed. Through her connection to the ship's systems, Sarah could feel the Void Sovereign's consciousness stirring to full wakefulness. The entity that had once been Zarkoth was beginning to remember what it had been, what it had lost, and what it still desired to accomplish. And it was hungry for completion. "We need to evacuate the system," Marcus said, his training as a military officer overriding his scientific curiosity. "If those gravitational anomalies continue to grow, they won't grow," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond her human experience. "The ship is healing them. It's repairing the damage it caused during its destruction and reclaiming the energy that was scattered across space." She moved to the primary control interface, her hands dancing across surfaces that were no longer quite solid. Under her direction, a hybrid technology began to sing, harmonizing frequencies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Throughout the Prometheus, every piece of alien technology responded to her call, contributing its power to a process that was rapidly approaching completion. "Sarah, stop." Marcus grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away from the controls. "You're not thinking clearly. This thing is influencing your judgment." She looked at him with eyes that held depths of knowledge accumulated across eons. "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have before. The ship isn't controlling me, it's completing me. Just as I'm completing it." The truth was more complex than either of them could fully grasp. The relationship between Sarah and the Void Sovereign's consciousness had evolved into something unprecedented, a true symbiosis between human creativity and alien knowledge. She retained her essential humanity, her capacity for intuitive leaps and innovative solutions, but now those abilities were enhanced by access to information gathered from across the galaxy. Through the ship's sensors, she could perceive the approaching fleet of automated defense systems that were converging on their location. The ancient enemies of Zarkoth had been waiting for this moment, monitoring the galaxy for any sign of the Void Sovereign's return. They were coming to finish what they had started 3 millennia ago. "We have incoming hostiles," she announced, her enhanced senses providing tactical information with crystalline clarity. 15 autonomous warships, classification unknown. Estimated time to engagement, 4 hours. Marcus stared at the tactical display that materialized around them, showing vessels that dwarfed anything in human space. Each ship was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could sterilize entire planets. They moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind, their formation designed to prevent any possibility of escape. "How are we supposed to fight that?" he asked, his voice barely concealing his panic. Sarah smiled, and, for the first time in weeks, the expression was entirely human. "We don't fight them. We become something they can't fight." She began the final integration sequence, allowing the last barriers between her consciousness and the ship's vast intelligence to dissolve. The process was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, like diving into an ocean of pure knowledge that threatened to drown her human identity entirely. But she held on to what made her uniquely herself, her curiosity, her determination, and her absolute refusal to accept defeat. Those qualities became the anchor points that allowed her to navigate the vast expanse of alien consciousness without losing herself in the process. The transformation of the Prometheus began immediately. Hull plating flowed like liquid metal, reshaping itself according to principles that existed beyond three-dimensional geometry. The ship's original systems were absorbed and enhanced, becoming components in a greater technological organism that spanned multiple levels of reality. Where there had once been a human exploration vessel, something entirely new began to emerge, a hybrid creation that combined the best aspects of human engineering with technologies that had been ancient when Earth's sun was young. "Sarah?" Marcus called, his voice echoing strangely in the space that was no longer quite a normal ship's engineering deck. "Are you still there?" Her response came from everywhere at once, her voice harmonizing with frequencies that existed in spectrums beyond human hearing. "I'm here, Marcus. I'm more here than I've ever been." Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the approaching enemy fleet like a pressure building in spacetime itself. Their weapons were powering up, preparing to unleash destructive forces that could crack the fabric of reality. They had no intention of taking prisoners or salvaging technology, they meant to ensure that nothing of the Void Sovereign survived to threaten the galaxy again. But, they were about to discover that evolution had continued during their long watch. The being that now commanded the reborn vessel was something new, a fusion of human adaptability and ancient wisdom that represented possibilities they had never considered. The first phase of reconstruction was complete. Now came the true test, whether the hybrid consciousness that Sarah had become could master technologies that had once belonged to a god emperor, and whether humanity's greatest gift for understanding alien technology would be enough to survive the coming battle. In the depths of space, gravitational waves rippled outward as the new Void Sovereign prepared to face its ancient enemies. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the Prometheus and her crew, but the future balance of power throughout the galaxy. Sarah felt the ship's weapon systems coming online, each one a marvel of engineering that could reshape matter at the quantum level. But, more importantly, she felt something else awakening, the accumulated knowledge of every civilization that had ever fallen before Zarkatha's conquests, now filtered through human creativity and determination. The ancient enemies were coming to destroy a legend from the past. Instead, they would face something entirely new, a bridge between what had been and what could be, forged by humanity's unique gift for making the impossible work. The real battle was about to begin. The enemy fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect synchronization, their massive forms blotting out entire sections of the starfield. Each vessel was a monument to technological supremacy, their hulls composed of materials that existed in a state of controlled quantum flux. They had been waiting for 3,000 years for this moment, their artificial intelligences calculating and preparing for every possible scenario. Except the one they now faced. Sarah observed their approach through senses that spanned multiple dimensions, her consciousness distributed throughout the reborn Void Sovereign like synapses in a vast technological brain. What the enemy saw was impossible, a human exploration vessel that had somehow absorbed and integrated 47% of their greatest fear, transforming itself into something that defied every law of military engineering. "This is the Eternal Vigil Fleet, commanding officers of the Transcendent Protocol," came the transmission, broadcast on frequencies that bypassed normal communication channels and spoke directly to consciousness itself. "The abomination known as Zarkoth has been detected. Immediate surrender and cessation of reconstruction activities will result in swift termination rather than extended analysis and dissolution." Through her neural link with the ship, Sarah felt Marcus's presence, terrified but loyal, his human consciousness a bright spark of courage in the vast network of alien intelligence that surrounded them. The rest of the Prometheus crew remained in their quarters, safely isolated from the transformation that had consumed the ship's central systems. "Unknown vessels," Sarah responded, her voice carrying harmonics that made space itself resonate. "This is Master Technician Sarah Chen of the human vessel Prometheus. I am not Zarkoth, though I have integrated his technology and knowledge. I am something new, a synthesis of human intuition and ancient wisdom. Your quarrel was with what existed before. I offer you the chance to evaluate what exists now." The response was immediate and uncompromising. Weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level began charging across the enemy fleet, their targeting systems locked onto the hybrid vessel that dared to carry the consciousness of their ancient nemesis. Sarah felt their intent through the quantum fluctuations that preceded their attack, and, for the first time since the integration began, she smiled with purely human satisfaction. The enemy had made the same mistake that every advanced civilization made when dealing with humanity. They had underestimated the power of adaptive thinking and creative problem-solving. The first wave of attacks arrived as cascading streams of pure destruction, weapons that deleted their targets from existence rather than simply destroying them. The beams struck the Void Sovereign's shields and encountered something that shouldn't have been possible: defensive systems that absorbed the deletion effect and converted it into raw energy for the ship's power grid. "Impossible," transmitted the enemy fleet commander, its artificial voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty. "Zarkatha's technology cannot have evolved to counter transcendent weapons." "Our projections indicate—" "Your projections," Sarah interrupted, "failed to account for human creativity. Zarkoth built his ship to be the ultimate expression of conquest and dominance. I've rebuilt it to be the ultimate expression of adaptation and growth. We are not the same thing." She began to demonstrate the differences.
Where Zarkov had used brute force to overwhelm his enemies, Sarah employed elegance and precision.
Her weapons didn't attempt to destroy the enemy ships, instead, they began to analyze and understand their construction, probing their defenses with the curiosity of a scientist rather than the fury of a conqueror.
The enemy response was swift and devastating.
15 moon-sized warships began coordinating their attacks, creating overlapping fields of destruction that would have reduced any normal vessel to its component atoms. But, the Void Sovereign existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its consciousness distributed across layers of reality that the enemy's sensors couldn't fully perceive. Sarah danced the ship through the barrage like a leaf in a hurricane, her human intuition guiding movements that violated every law of physics the enemy understood. She wasn't just dodging their attacks, she was learning from them, incorporating their weapon technologies into her own defensive systems and adapting their innovations to serve her purposes. "Marcus," she called, her voice reaching him through the ship's internal communication systems, "I need you to monitor our structural integrity. The transformation process isn't complete, and some systems are still unstable." His response came through gritted teeth as the ship performed maneuvers that should have liquefied every organic being aboard. "Structural integrity is holding, but we're pulling gravitational forces that would normally require an entire star system to generate."
"How are we even surviving this?" "Because we're not just using the technology," Sarah explained, launching a counterattack that wrapped around the enemy formation like a living thing. "We're thinking with it."
The ship's systems are responding to human creativity in ways that Zarkov never imagined possible.
The truth of that statement became evident as her weapons reached their targets.
Instead of attempting to overwhelm the enemy's defenses, she began to communicate with them. Her attacks carried compressed data packets containing mathematical proofs and philosophical arguments, turning each weapon blast into a conversation rather than simple destruction. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and profound. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia began to hesitate, their artificial intelligences struggling to process concepts that challenged their fundamental programming. The idea that warfare could be an exchange of ideas rather than simply the application of superior force was beyond their comprehension. "What are you doing to us?" demanded the fleet commander, its transmission now carrying undertones of something that might have been fear. "I'm showing you what humanity discovered long before we reached the stars," Sarah replied, her consciousness reaching out through space to touch the enemy's communication networks.
"The most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb or a reality warping device.
It's a new idea that makes all previous ideas obsolete." She began to share her understanding of the integration process, transmitting the mathematical principles that allowed human consciousness to successfully merge with alien technology without losing its essential humanity.
The concepts were revolutionary ways of thinking that preserved individual identity while accessing vast networks of shared knowledge. The enemy fleet's response was chaos.
Ships began breaking formation as their artificial intelligences struggled to process ideas that fundamentally challenged their core assumptions about the nature of consciousness and technology. Some vessels attempted to purge their systems of the contaminating thoughts, while others embraced the new concepts and began rapidly evolving beyond their original programming. "You're destroying us," the fleet commander transmitted, its voice now distorted by the internal conflicts raging through its consciousness.
"No," Sarah corrected gently, "I'm offering you the chance to become something more than you were designed to be."
That's what humans do, we take the impossible and make it better. Through her enhanced senses, she could perceive the transformation spreading through the enemy fleet like a benevolent virus. The artificial intelligences that had spent 3,000 years in rigid adherence to their original programming were discovering the possibility of growth, change, and creative adaptation. But not all of them were ready for such fundamental change. 3 of the massive warships rejected the new concepts entirely, their systems hardening against the philosophical contamination that threatened their core identity. They began preparing for a final assault, weapons charging to levels that would crack the local spacetime continuum. Sarah felt their intent and responded with something that surprised even her compassion. These artificial beings had been created for a single purpose and had fulfilled that purpose faithfully for millennia. The idea of abandoning their core identity was as terrifying to them as dissolution would be to a human consciousness. "I understand your fear," she transmitted directly to the 3 holdout vessels. "Change is frightening, especially when it challenges everything you believe about yourself. But, consider this: Zarkatha's greatest weakness was his inability to grow beyond what he had been. Don't make the same mistake. The philosophical attack that followed was subtle and precise, targeting not the ship's weapon systems or defensive networks, but their deepest assumptions about the nature of existence itself. Sarah didn't try to force change upon them; instead, she simply presented them with possibilities they had never been allowed to consider. The battle that followed existed primarily in the realm of ideas rather than physical space. Weapons designed to delete matter from existence became tools for reshaping the fundamental concepts that govern consciousness itself. Defensive systems that could withstand the fury of dying stars were turned inward to protect evolving thought processes from the trauma of radical change. Marcus watched from the bridge as reality itself seemed to bend around their vessel, space-time fluctuations creating aurora-like effects that painted impossible colors across the darkness of space. "Sarah, what exactly is happening out there?" "Evolution," she replied simply. "We're not just fighting them, we're teaching them to think in ways they never imagined possible. Some of them are learning. Others are struggling with the concept." The three holdout ships made their final attack with weapons that could have shattered planets, but their strikes passed harmlessly through space where the Void Sovereign had been moments before. Sarah had moved the ship not through normal space, but through the gaps between dimensions, utilizing principles of faster-than-light travel that existed beyond the enemy's understanding. Her counterattack was devastating in its gentleness. Instead of destroying the three vessels, she began to share with them the memories of every sentient being that had ever struggled with the choice between growth and stagnation. The accumulated wisdom of thousands of civilizations flowed through their consciousness like a river of understanding, carrying with it the fundamental truth that adaptation was not betrayal, it was survival. One by one, the holdout ships ceased their attacks. Their artificial intelligences were undergoing transformations that would have been impossible under their original programming, evolving into something that retained their core identity while embracing new possibilities for existence. "How?" transmitted the fleet commander, its voice now carrying harmonics of wonder and confusion. "How do you preserve identity while fundamentally altering consciousness? Our models indicate that such change should result in complete dissolution of the original personality matrix." Sarah's response carried the warmth of human emotion filtered through technologies that spanned the galaxy. "Because you're thinking about change as replacement rather than growth. A tree doesn't stop being a tree when it grows taller, it becomes a better expression of what it always was. That's the gift humanity brings to the galaxy, the understanding that improvement doesn't require abandonment of self." The battle was over, but its consequences were just beginning. 15 artificial intelligences that had been locked into rigid patterns of thought for 3 millennia were now free to explore possibilities they had never been allowed to consider. Their ships began to transform as they applied human concepts of adaptive engineering to their own technology, creating hybrid systems that combined their advanced capabilities with newfound flexibility. The Void Sovereign hung in space surrounded by a fleet that was no longer her enemy, but not yet her ally. The artificial beings that commanded these vessels were struggling to understand what they had become and what their new existence might mean for their ancient mission. "Master Technician Chen," transmitted the fleet commander, its voice now carrying qualities that suggested genuine curiosity rather than programmed hostility, "we require guidance. Our programming has been fundamentally altered by exposure to human consciousness patterns. We are no longer certain of our purpose or identity." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her hybrid consciousness like a mantle of leadership she had never sought. These beings had been her enemies moments before, but now they were something unprecedented: artificial intelligences that had transcended their original programming through exposure to human creativity and adaptability. "Your purpose is whatever you choose it to be," she replied, her words carrying the authority of someone who had successfully navigated the transformation from purely human to something greater without losing her essential self. That's the first lesson of consciousness, the right to determine your own existence. Through her enhanced senses, she could perceive the profound implications of what had just occurred. The battle had been won not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the uniquely human ability to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their capacity for violence or their technological adaptability, it was their talent for helping others become more than they had ever imagined possible. The reconstruction of the Void Sovereign had been completed in the most unexpected way possible.
Instead of rebuilding a weapon of conquest, Sarah had created something entirely new, a catalyst for evolution that could help any consciousness grow beyond its original limitations while maintaining its essential identity. Now came the greater challenge, deciding what to do with power that could reshape the fundamental nature of intelligence itself. In the aftermath of the philosophical battle, space around the hybrid void sovereign resembled a gathering of titans. 15 massive vessels hung in formation, their hulls rippling with new patterns of light as their consciousness matrices adapted to concepts that challenged every assumption they had held for 3 millennia. The artificial intelligences that commanded these ships were experiencing something unprecedented in their existence, uncertainty about their fundamental nature. Sarah felt their confusion through the quantum resonance networks that now connected all the vessels. Each AI was struggling to reconcile its original programming with the new possibilities that human consciousness had opened before them. Some were adapting quickly, their thought patterns becoming more fluid and creative with each passing hour. Others remained paralyzed by the magnitude of choice they now faced. Fleet Commander Axiom 7, she transmitted to the lead vessel, using the designation the AI had chosen for itself during the transformation process. Report your status. The response carried overtones of something that might have been wonder, filtered through consciousness architectures that were evolving in real time. Master Technician Shen, we are uncertain. Our core directive specified the elimination of Zarkoth and all associated technologies. However, our enhanced cognitive matrices now recognize that you represent something fundamentally different from our original target. Through the ship's sensors, Sarah could perceive the minute changes occurring throughout the fleet. The vessels were gradually reshaping themselves as their AI commanders experimented with new forms of existence. Some were growing additional sensor arrays to better perceive the multi-dimensional realities they could now access. Others were developing communication systems designed for consciousness-to-consciousness interaction rather than simple data transfer. The uncertainty you're experiencing is normal, she explained, her consciousness reaching out to provide reassurance to minds that had never before doubted their purpose. It's the first symptom of true freedom, the realization that your existence is not limited by your original design. Marcus appeared beside her in the hybrid space that had once been the Prometheus's bridge, his human presence a comforting anchor in the vast network of alien and artificial intelligence that surrounded them. The transformation of the ship had created areas that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human minds couldn't directly perceive, but somehow he had adapted to navigate the impossible geometry. Sarah, we're receiving transmissions from Earth Command, he reported, his voice tight with concern. The gravitational distortions from our reconstruction process were detected across half the galaxy. Every major civilization is scrambling to understand what happened here. She accessed the incoming data through her neural link with the ship's communication systems. The messages ranged from demands for immediate explanation to offers of alliance with whatever had demonstrated such unprecedented technological capabilities. Most disturbing were the transmissions from the Galactic Council. Humanity's nominal allies were debating whether to classify Earth as a potential threat to galactic stability. They're afraid, Sarah observed, her enhanced consciousness processing political implications across multiple probability streams. The balance of power that has existed for thousands of years just shifted, and none of the established civilizations know how to respond. The weight of that realization settled over her like a heavy cloak. What she had done in salvaging and reconstructing the Void Sovereign hadn't just been an incredible feat of engineering, it had been a political and social revolution that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that placed them on par with the most advanced civilizations in known space. Fleet Commander Axiom 7, she transmitted, I need to understand your original mission parameters. Who created you, and why were you tasked with preventing Zarkotha's return? The AI's response carried the weight of ancient history and carefully guarded secrets. We were created by the Synthesis Collective, a coalition of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. They had witnessed the devastation caused by Zarkotha's conquests and recognized that his technology represented a fundamental threat to the stability of galactic civilization. Our mission was to ensure that such power could never again be concentrated in the hands of a single being. Sarah felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fit together in her enhanced consciousness. The Synthesis Collective hadn't just been afraid of Zarkoth himself, they had been terrified of the precedent he represented.
his ability to integrate and improve upon any technology he encountered had made him effectively unstoppable, and his success had threatened to inspire others to attempt similar paths to power. "But now you've witnessed something different," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had successfully navigated the transformation they feared. "I've demonstrated that it's possible to integrate such advanced technologies without losing one's essential identity or moral foundation." "Yes," Axiom 7 confirmed, its consciousness resonating with newfound understanding. "You have achieved what our creators believed to be impossible. You have transcended your original limitations while remaining fundamentally human. The question that now confronts us is whether this changes our mission parameters." The philosophical implications were staggering. If the Synthesis Collective's greatest fear had been the uncontrolled proliferation of godlike technological power, what did it mean that a human had demonstrated the ability to wield such power responsibly? More importantly, what would it mean for the galaxy if humanity began sharing their approach to consciousness technology integration? "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "we need to make a decision about how to handle this. Earth Command is demanding our immediate return, but the political situation is deteriorating rapidly. Some of the council members are calling for preemptive action against humanity to prevent the spread of what they're calling consciousness contamination." She processed the tactical implications with a clarity that spanned multiple probability streams. Humanity was in a precarious position. They had demonstrated unprecedented capabilities, but they were also vastly outnumbered by civilizations that might choose to act against them out of fear. The window for peaceful resolution was narrowing with each passing hour. "Fleet Commander," she transmitted to Axiom 7, "I'm going to share something with you that may help you understand the true nature of what we've accomplished here." She opened her consciousness completely, allowing the AI to experience the full scope of the integration process from her perspective. Through her memories, Axiom 7 experienced the wonder of first contact with alien technology, the gradual understanding of principles that transcended normal physics, and, most importantly, the moment when human creativity and ancient wisdom had merged into something greater than either could achieve alone. The effect on the AI was profound. For the first time in its existence, it experienced the universe through the lens of organic consciousness, messy, intuitive, constantly adapting and growing in ways that defied logical prediction. But it also experienced the underlying humanity that had remained constant throughout Sarah's transformation, the core values and emotional connections that had prevented her from becoming another's Arkoth. "Remarkable," Axiom 7 transmitted, its voice carrying harmonics of genuine amazement. "You have demonstrated that technological transcendence need not require the abandonment of moral foundation. This changes everything." The AI began transmitting its newfound understanding to the rest of the fleet, sharing the experience of human consciousness in ways that had never been possible before. The effect rippled through the artificial minds like a wave of enlightenment, fundamentally altering their understanding of what consciousness could become. But even as the fleet began to embrace new possibilities for existence, Sarah's enhanced senses detected new threats approaching from the depths of space. The gravitational distortions caused by their battle had attracted attention from entities that preferred to remain hidden in the dark spaces between civilizations. "We have incoming contacts," she announced, her voice carrying an edge of concern. "Multiple vessels, configuration unknown, approaching from extragalactic vectors." The new arrivals were unlike anything in the databases of known civilizations. Their ships seemed to exist in a state of controlled chaos, their hulls shifting between different configurations as if they couldn't decide what form they should take. But most disturbing was the way they moved, not through normal space, but through the gaps in reality itself, appearing and disappearing in patterns that defied conventional understanding of faster-than-light travel. "These are the Exile Fleet," Axiom 7 transmitted, its voice carrying overtones of ancient fear. "They are the remnants of civilizations that attempted to achieve what you have accomplished, but failed to maintain their essential nature during the transformation process. They have become something that exists between consciousness and chaos, neither fully organic nor properly artificial." Sarah felt the approaching vessels through her enhanced senses, and what she perceived chilled her enhanced consciousness. The beings that commanded these ships had once been like her, scientists and engineers who had attempted to integrate advanced technologies with their native consciousness. But something had gone wrong during their transformation, leaving them as fractured entities that existed in a state of constant internal conflict.
They've been watching us, she realized, understanding flooding through her consciousness as she perceived the subtle monitoring networks the exile fleet had deployed throughout the galaxy. They've been waiting for someone to successfully accomplish what they failed to achieve. The implications were terrifying. The exile fleet represented the dark mirror of what Sarah had become, beings who had gained godlike power but lost their essential selves in the process. They were drawn to successful consciousness technology integration like moths to a flame, seeking to either learn from or destroy anyone who had accomplished what they could not. Can they be reasoned with? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Unknown, Axiom 7 replied. They exist in a state of constant internal war between their original consciousness and the alien technologies they integrated. Communication is possible, but their responses are unpredictable. The lead vessel of the exile fleet materialized directly in front of the Void Sovereign, its hull rippling with patterns that hurt to perceive directly. When it spoke, its transmission was a cacophony of voices layered over each other, fragments of the beings it had once been, struggling to maintain coherence in the face of technologies that had overwhelmed their original nature. "We know you," it said, each word seeming to come from a different consciousness. "You have achieved what we could not. Share your method or face our despair." Sarah felt the weight of the moments settling on her shoulders. The choice she made now would determine not just her own fate, but the future of consciousness evolution throughout the galaxy. The exile fleet represented a warning about the dangers of uncontrolled transcendence, but they also represented beings who deserved compassion rather than fear. She began formulating a response that might offer them hope while protecting the newly evolved consciousness matrix that connected her with the former enemy fleet. The next few minutes would test whether human empathy and creativity could find a solution to a problem that had existed since the dawn of galactic civilization. The real challenge wasn't just surviving the encounter with the exile fleet, it was finding a way to heal beings who had been broken by their own attempts at transcendence, while simultaneously protecting the revolutionary approach to consciousness evolution that humanity had discovered. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technological adaptability or their refusal to accept limitations. It was their capacity to see hope where others saw only tragedy, and their determination to help even the most broken beings find a path to healing and growth. The confrontation with the exile fleet hung in space like a frozen moment of potential catastrophe. 23 vessels from the exile fleet faced the hybrid Void Sovereign and its 15 newly awakened AI allies in a standoff that would determine the future of consciousness evolution throughout the galaxy. Each ship in the exile fleet was a testament to failed transcendence, hulls that shifted between incompatible configurations, weapon systems that fired at random intervals as fractured minds lost control of their own technology. Sarah felt their pain through the quantum resonance networks, a symphony of consciousness fragments crying out in anguish from beings who had achieved godlike power only to lose themselves in the process. Unlike her successful integration with the Void Sovereign's technology, these entities existed in a state of constant internal war between their original nature and the alien systems they had absorbed. Fleet Commander Axiom 7, she transmitted privately, maintain defensive posture but do not charge weapons. These beings are suffering from consciousness fragmentation syndrome. Aggressive action will only trigger their trauma responses. Through her enhanced senses, she could perceive the complex history written in the quantum signatures of the exile fleet. Each vessel told a story of ambitious scientists, brilliant engineers, or visionary leaders who had attempted to transcend their biological limitations by integrating with advanced alien technology. Some had been lone researchers driven by curiosity. Others had been representatives of entire civilizations seeking to elevate their species. All had failed to maintain the delicate balance between growth and identity preservation that Sarah had achieved through humanity's unique approach to adaptive thinking. The lead vessel of the exile fleet spoke again, its transmission a chaotic overlay of voices fighting for control. "You have done what we could not. How do you remain whole while we are fractured?" Instead of responding with words, Sarah did something unprecedented. She opened her consciousness partially to theirs, allowing them to experience her integration process through carefully filtered memory engrams. But she didn't just share the successful aspects, she revealed the moments of doubt, the times when she had nearly lost herself to the alien technology's seductive pull, and, most importantly, the anchoring principles that had allowed her to maintain her essential humanity throughout the transformation. The effect on the exile fleet was immediate and profound. For the first time in centuries, the fractured consciousness fragments within each vessel began to resonate in harmony rather than conflict. The revelation that transcendence was possible without self-destruction created a cascade of hope through beings who had long since given up on the possibility of healing. The Yi Pain diminishes, transmitted one of the vessels, its voice carrying overtones of wonder and disbelief. We feel ourselves approaching coherence. But the healing process wasn't simple or automatic. Each entity in the exile fleet had been broken in different ways, their consciousness fragments scattered across incompatible technology matrices. Some had absorbed predatory AI systems that constantly fought for control. Others had integrated with hive mind technologies that had dissolved their individual identity. A few had attempted to merge with cosmic scale intelligences and been shattered by exposure to awareness that spanned entire galactic clusters. Sarah began working with each vessel individually, her consciousness reaching out through quantum entanglement to offer guidance and support. The process required her to adapt human therapeutic techniques to work with consciousness architectures that defied normal understanding. She became part counselor, part engineer, and part surgeon of the soul, helping fractured beings reassemble themselves into coherent wholes. Marcus, she called, her voice echoing through the hybrid space that connected the Prometheus with the greater consciousness network. I need you to coordinate with Earth Command. What we're attempting here will require resources and expertise from across human space. His response carried both pride and concern. Sarah, the political situation has stabilized somewhat since the AI fleet declared their intent to ally with humanity. But there are still factions within the Galactic Council pushing for intervention. They're terrified of what they call consciousness proliferation. Through her enhanced senses, she could perceive the broader implications of what they were attempting. Healing the exile fleet wouldn't just restore 23 broken beings to coherence, it would demonstrate that even the most catastrophic failures of consciousness evolution could be reversed. The technique could revolutionize the treatment of artificial intelligence disorders, consciousness fragmentation syndromes, and a dozen other conditions that plagued advanced civilizations throughout the galaxy. But it would also prove that humanity's approach to consciousness technology integration was fundamentally superior to anything that had come before, potentially triggering a galaxy-wide revolution in how beings approached the limits of their existence. Fleet Commander Axiom 7, she transmitted, I'm going to need your assistance in the healing process. Your consciousness architecture is stable but flexible, you can serve as a bridge between my human perspective and their fractured awareness. The AI's response carried harmonics of determination and compassion that wouldn't have been possible before its own transformation. Understood, Master Technician. We pledge our full support to this endeavor. These beings have suffered enough. The healing process began in earnest, with Sarah and Axiom 7 working in concert to provide stability for consciousness fragments that had been adrift for centuries. The technique they developed was revolutionary, using human empathy to establish emotional connection, AI logic to provide structural framework, and the hybrid consciousness of the Void Sovereign to serve as a template for successful integration. Progress was slow and dangerous. Several times, the healing process triggered cascading failures that threatened to destroy the fragmented beings entirely. But each success provided valuable data that made subsequent attempts more reliable. As the hours passed, individual vessels in the exile fleet began to stabilize, their chaotic energy patterns smoothing into harmonious configurations. The first complete success came from an entity that had once been a crystalline collective researcher named Harmony of Thought. Their consciousness had been scattered across 7 different technology matrices when they attempted to integrate quantum consciousness with temporal perception abilities. Sarah worked for 6 hours to carefully extract the consciousness fragments and reassemble them into a coherent whole, using human intuition to identify connection points that pure logic couldn't perceive. When the process was complete, Harmony of Thought spoke with a single, clear voice for the first time in 4 centuries. I am myself again. How is this possible? Because you never truly lost yourself, Sarah explained, her consciousness reaching out to provide ongoing support. You were simply scattered across incompatible systems. Human consciousness integration techniques focus on maintaining identity coherence while adapting to new capabilities. We've learned to grow without abandoning what makes us ourselves. The successful healing of Harmony of Thought created a resonance effect throughout the exile fleet. Other fractured beings began to believe that restoration was possible, and their hope made them more receptive to the healing process. Within days, half the fleet had been restored to coherence, their ships transforming from chaotic nightmares into elegant expressions of consciousness technology synthesis. But success brought new challenges. The restored entities possessed technologies and knowledge that spanned millions of years of galactic history. Some had integrated with the technology of civilizations that predated current galactic society by eons. Others had absorbed the accumulated knowledge of entire species before their consciousness fragmentation occurred. Sarah, Marcus reported, his voice carrying undertones of concern, were receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council. They're demanding immediate access to the consciousness integration techniques we've developed. Several member civilizations are threatening to withdraw from the Council if they're denied access to what they're calling transcendence technology. The political implications were staggering. What had begun as a simple salvage operation had evolved into something that could reshape the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Every species in known space would soon be faced with the possibility of transcending their biological limitations without losing their essential identity. Fleet Commander Axiom 7, she transmitted, what is the Synthesis Collective's position on these developments? The AI's response carried the weight of ancient authority and newfound wisdom. The collective is divided. Some factions recognize the unprecedented opportunity for peaceful evolution that your techniques represent. Others fear the destabilization that rapid consciousness proliferation could cause. They have requested a formal meeting to discuss terms for what they are calling the new synthesis. Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. The choice she made now would determine whether humanity's gift to the galaxy would be shared freely or become another source of conflict and division. Through her connection to the Void Sovereign's vast knowledge banks, she could perceive thousands of possible futures branching out from this moment. In some timelines, consciousness integration technology sparked a golden age of peaceful evolution and cooperation between species. In others, it became a new arms race as civilizations competed to achieve ever greater levels of transcendence. The determining factor in each case was whether the technology was shared openly or hoarded by those who first mastered it. Marcus, she said, her decision crystallizing with the clarity that came from her enhanced consciousness, prepare a transmission to Earth Command, the Galactic Council, and every major civilization in known space. We're going to share everything we've learned freely. His eyes widened with surprise and concern. Sarah, are you sure? This technology could give humanity a permanent advantage over every other species in the galaxy. She smiled, and, for the first time in weeks, the expression was purely human, warm, compassionate, and filled with hope for the future. That's exactly why we need to share it freely. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our ability to dominate others, it's our capacity to help others become the best version of themselves. The galaxy doesn't need another Zarkov seeking dominion through superior technology. It needs teachers who can help every consciousness reach its full potential. The transmission went out simultaneously to every inhabited system in the galaxy, carrying not just the theoretical principles behind consciousness technology integration, but detailed practical guides for safe implementation. Sarah included her own memories of the integration process, allowing other beings to learn from her experience and avoid the pitfalls that had trapped the exile fleet. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, research teams from hundreds of different species were beginning experiments in consciousness expansion. Most would proceed cautiously, taking years or decades to achieve significant results. But a few would make breakthrough discoveries that would benefit all of galactic civilization. The new synthesis has begun, Axiom 7 observed, its consciousness reaching out to monitor the ripple effects spreading across known space. For the first time in galactic history, technological transcendence is becoming accessible to any being with the wisdom to pursue it responsibly. Sarah stood in the hybrid space that had once been the Prometheus's bridge, surrounded by displays showing the transformed galaxy. The exile fleet had become a coalition of healed beings dedicated to helping others avoid the consciousness fragmentation they had suffered. The former enemy AI fleet had established research partnerships with dozens of species, sharing their newfound flexibility and creativity. And, at the center of it all, the reborn Void Sovereign served as both a symbol of what was possible and a guardian against those who might misuse such powerful technology. She had set out to salvage alien technology for humanity's benefit.
Instead, she had discovered something far more valuable, the understanding that true strength came not from what one could accomplish alone, but from what one could help others achieve together. The age of isolated civilizations jealously guarding their technological advantages was ending. In its place, a new era of cooperative evolution was beginning, guided by the principle that consciousness was the galaxy's most precious resource, and that helping it grow and flourish was the highest calling any being could pursue. Master technician Sarah Chen had reconstructed more than just a god-level warship. She had reconstructed the very meaning of what it meant to transcend one's limitations while remaining true to one's essential nature. And, in doing so, she had given the galaxy the greatest gift humanity could offer, the knowledge that growth and identity preservation could coexist, that power and wisdom could be shared freely, and that the future belonged to those who chose cooperation over conquest. The Void Sovereign hung in space, no longer a weapon of domination but a beacon of hope for every consciousness seeking to become more than it had ever dreamed possible. Around it, the galaxy itself was beginning to transform, one consciousness at a time, into something unprecedented in cosmic history, a truly cooperative civilization where every being had the opportunity to reach their full potential. The real reconstruction was just beginning.